Eileen's life is basically a bad comedy sketch. First, she was seconds away from getting her head chopped off. Then she stumbled into the twisted young master of the Duke's house who thought consent was optional and stole a kiss. Before she could even recover, her trash of a father decided to sell her off like a second-hand teapot. If misfortune had a favorite child, it would definitely be Eileen. On a sunny day as bright as gold, a man trembled in fear while being dragged to the guillotine. His body shook as he struggled for breath. Realizing his fate was sealed, the official glanced at his watch, confirmed the time, and signaled for silence among the crowd. He declared that the late emperor, in all his greatness, had been betrayed by the devil's claws of narcotics. He emphasized that drugs were an unforgivable crime of the highest order, and under imperial law, Article 47, Clause 1, anyone who unlawfully used or distributed them was to be executed immediately. The man cried desperately for forgiveness, but the official allowed the guillotine to fall, severing his head in one stroke. Gasps filled the air before the crowd erupted into loud cheers celebrating justice. Eileen, however, felt disgusted by the sight. Around her, whispers spread. People remarked that the culprit was fortunate to be caught before Grand Duke Caesar's return. They said that if the ruthless Duke had been in charge, the entire family of the criminal would have faced execution together. They recalled that he had once taken the head of the king of Calpen in a single stroke during the war. Many rulers spared captured kings for negotiations, but he had been deemed insane. Now that the war was over, his return to the capital was imminent. Eileen, startled by the thought, dropped the bucket of leaves she carried. As she bent down, people around her began to notice her presence. Some recognized her, murmuring that she was the famous apothecary from the nearby street, praising her for her remedies. Alarmed, Eileen turned and ran. On her way, familiar voices called out, praising her for her remedies. They said their arms no longer hurt, and the medicine she had prescribed had worked wonders. A mother shouted that her child's fever had broken completely thanks to Eileen, insisting that they did not know what they would have done without her. Eileen kept running, thinking to herself that it was fine as long as she could help others. Even if she used forbidden means, she believed the results were worth it. She assured herself she could do it. All of it was for his excellence. Stopping for a moment, she reminded herself that she needed to finish her research as quickly as possible before her secret was discovered. When she reached her room, she looked around cautiously, noting how quiet the inn felt. She wondered if it had ever been this empty, then realized most people must have gone to watch the execution. Still, something felt wrong as she placed her hand on the door. She hesitated, thinking she might be overreacting, and pushed it open. Inside, to her shock, a tall and handsome man sat casually playing with one of her pots. Eileen froze, her breath catching in her throat. She softly addressed him as His Excellence. It was Cesare Karl, the Grand Duke of Erzat. Cesare called out her name, Eileen Elrod. She felt her chest tighten, surprised that he was there, and asked why he had returned so soon. He smiled faintly, asking if that was truly all she had to say to him. Eileen quickly apologized, offering congratulations on his victory. She explained that she had intended to show her respect, but assumed he would be too busy preparing for the triumph ceremony. Cesare tilted his head, remarking that he had heard she had done something rather unusual in his absence. Eileen's heart sank as she tried to feign ignorance, asking what he meant. His eyes darkened as he stated firmly that it was drugs. He accused her of making opium. Eileen stammered, trying to excuse herself, but Cesare dismissed her attempt, telling her she should have known that the excuse of researching painkillers would never work. He reminded her that she knew well manufacturing or distributing narcotics in the Empire was punishable by death. He also reminded her that he, as Grand Duke, held the right of immediate execution. At those words, Eileen dropped her bucket again, her hands trembling. She pleaded with him, addressing him and crying that she had only wanted to help the wounded soldiers. She swore it could be of great use in their recovery. With tears streaming down, she admitted she had known drugs were illegal, but insisted her intentions had been good. To her surprise, Cesare stepped closer, his tone softening. He told her that he had not come to frighten her. He asked her to listen carefully, for he had a different purpose. He explained that he happened to need a Grand Duchess. Slowly, he reached out, removed the glasses from her face, and placed them on himself. Looking straight into her eyes, he asked calmly if they should marry. Eileen was taken aback by what she heard. She wondered if he had always been the type to make such jokes, assuming at first that it was not serious. She tried to gather her words, stuttering as she attempted to respond. Suddenly, a wave of seizures ran through her body, and before she could restrain herself, she blurted out that she did not want to marry him. Cesare paused as he reached out to pat her gently. He remarked that her reaction hurt his pride. In his words, she would rather lose her head under the guillotine than agree to marry him. Eileen quickly denied it, insisting that this was not what she had meant. Caesar asked her directly what she did mean then. Either way, he told her she was destined to face one of two ends: execution by beheading or being sold off to some vulgar man with no honor. Eileen pressed for clarity, asking what he truly meant by those words. Caesar repeated his question, demanding to know why she did not wish to accept his proposal. Gathering her courage, Eileen tried to explain. She said that there was no possibility His Excellency could truly hold feelings for her. It had to be because of her mother. Since she was the daughter of his childhood nanny, he had always looked after her out of obligation. Perhaps he still viewed her as a child. Surely, she reasoned, he must need an heir, and that could only mean. Her voice faltered, unable to finish the thought. To her shock, Cesare closed the distance between them without warning. He leaned in and pressed his lips against hers, his kiss forceful as he deepened it. Eileen flinched, her body tensing as his tongue parted her lips. When he finally pulled away, he bit her gently on the lower lip before stepping back. He asked if she felt her doubts had now been answered. Later, Eileen was informed that His Excellency had given strict orders. From that moment onward, she was to be escorted directly to the ducal residence. Rotan, the Knight of Caesar, asked if she was all right, but she could hardly respond. Embarrassed and uncertain, Eileen confided in Sir Rotan, explaining that His Excellency had proposed marriage to her. Rotan, however, reacted with indifference. His reply was flat, as if the matter carried little surprise. He simply remarked that it was obvious. Lady Eileen, after all, faced execution, and the Empire's crackdown on narcotics had grown harsher by the day. In his view, His Excellency had merely found a way to save her life while also securing a Grand Duchess. It was the most practical solution available. Eileen thought carefully on his words, realizing that it truly was the most efficient decision. Her mother, once the nanny of His Excellency, had bound their family closely to the ducal faction. If she were to be executed for charges related to narcotics, the shame would also tarnish the Duke's reputation. But if the marriage had been born only from efficiency, then it meant that if it had not been her, it could have been anyone else. It was a marriage without love, stripped of any sentiment. Rotan added plainly that regardless of her feelings, there was no choice left for her. He asked why she had involved herself with narcotics to begin with. Eileen answered softly that she had only wanted to help. Her wish had been to serve His Excellency in some meaningful way. Since childhood, she had received nothing but his aid, and she longed to return it. She explained that a strong painkiller was essential in war, and she believed her research could prove valuable. Rotan then asked how she thought they had discovered her activities. What surprised him most, he said, was her assumption that Cesare would not notice her movements. She had been purchasing opium so openly and so diligently that suspicion was inevitable. At first, Rotan even suspected that Lady Eileen might be addicted herself, or perhaps she had been deceived by someone else. Eileen quickly denied such claims, insisting she was not foolish enough to fall for such traps. Rotan sighed and said that in any case, everything His Excellency was doing had been for her sake. It must weigh heavily on her, but it was the truth. Eileen lowered her head, whispering that she needed time to think. She thought about her father, realizing that he would become a burden if she accepted. Eileen added firmly, saying they all knew what kind of man her father was. His presence alone would surely become a burden to His Excellency. Eileen noticed the shadow that crossed Rotan's face as he spoke, and it unsettled her deeply. Soon after, Rotan changed the subject. He said that more importantly, everyone wished to see her. He explained that when he had told them she might visit, they asked him to convey their regards. Eileen brightened, her heart lifting slightly, and asked eagerly if everyone was doing well. She mentioned Sir Sinan, Michelle, and Sir Diego in particular. Rotan confirmed that they were all fine. He even added that Diego, ever the mischievous one, had prepared a rabbit doll as a gift for Lady Eileen upon his return. Meanwhile, at Eileen's home, Cesare was buried in a pile of documents. He looked up from her work and allowed himself a faint smile. For now, he thought everything was going according to plan. He glanced at the clock, his expression sharpening. As his thoughts grew heavy, all of it, he believed, was for the sake of that one person. 11 years earlier, little Eileen had wandered about, calling for her mother and asking where she was. From behind, Caesarea appeared and asked if she was Lily, the daughter of the nanny. Seeing Eileen crying, he asked whether Lily was her real name or only a nickname. Trembling, Eileen admitted it was not her true name, but simply what her mother used to call her. In tears, she ran into his arms, saying she had lost her mother, who had told her to stay put, but she had been distracted by a strange flower. Tazari smiled gently, remarking that her mother was searching frantically for her as well. He picked her up, assuring her that he would take her back. In the present, Eileen sat, confused, reflecting on the memory. She thought about how relieved she had been to meet an adult that day, and how she had thrown herself into his arms without hesitation. Yet, she reminded herself that even then, His Excellency had only been a young prince, and perhaps she should have run to Sir Rotan instead. She remembered her mother's words clearly, no matter what. She was never to tarnish His Highness's honor. Their Rod family existed solely to serve him, and she was never to forget that truth. She reminded herself that he was now the Grand Duke of Erzet, Supreme Commander of the powerful Tone Empire. After a fierce struggle for the throne, he had placed his one and only blood brother upon it with his own hands, an act that had proven both his nobility and greatness. He was in existence above all, a man worthy of respect and reverence. Yet, she thought bitterly, someone like her, a country girl, was supposed to become the Grand Duchess. If her mother were alive, she would never have allowed such a thing. For someone like her to hold that position was nothing less than a stain upon His Excellency's honor. Eileen's thoughts twisted further as she considered her future. She began to believe there must be another way, some way to escape both execution and the marriage forced upon her. She glanced around in surprise, realizing how late it had grown, and wondered if her father had still not returned home. A week later in the entertainment district, Eileen wore a disguise as she hurried through the streets, chased by a group of girls. She thought to herself that it had already been a full week and her father was likely still gambling as always. She believed his gambling money must have come from somewhere dishonorable. She recalled him yelling before leaving, shouting that the Grand Duke was returning and that the construction of the Arc de Triomphe had been approved. He had called it a great celebration, boasting that it had been some time since he could hit the saunapot and said he would step out for a while. Eileen remembered confronting him then, asking what he was talking about. She suspected that it must have been the day he went to see His Excellency. If her father truly had borrowed gambling funds from him, there must have been a price attached. She resolved to recover whatever money he had left and return it herself. She could not allow her father's shame to trouble His Excellency any further. As she moved cautiously, she realized she was being followed. A group of rough-looking men caught up with her, one grabbing at her hood and exposing her face. Her identity as a woman was revealed, and she froze, demanding to know who they were. One of them said he had known her work looked suspicious and expressed surprise that she was a woman. Another remarked that, with her gloomy appearance and her bangs covering her face, it was difficult to even notice her gender. They sneered, suggesting that they should take advantage of her and have some fun. Eileen instinctively tried to back away, but her foot slipped and she stumbled. A chill swept through her as she thought that if she fell now, it would bring great disaster. Suddenly, from behind, someone caught her and steadied her. His voice cut through the laughter of the men, remarking that he had been wondering where the foul smell was coming from. To him, it looked as though all the trash of the district had gathered in one place. The moment the men saw him, fear gripped them. The person remarked that such men had nothing better to do, so they had chosen to harass a girl, proof of their cruel and vile nature. He declared that today he would execute them without hesitation. But Eileen suddenly called out, addressing him as Sir Diego, which startled him greatly. Diego immediately cried out for Lady Eileen, and the harassers fled in panic. Diego let out a breath of relief, thanking the heavens that she was safe. He asked what in the world she was doing alone in such a dangerous district at such a late hour. He said the incident could have ended in disaster, and he pleaded with her to calm down and catch her breath. He cursed those despicable men, vowing that he would ensure they were captured somehow. Eileen, however, turned the question back to him, asking why he was in such a Place himself. Diego looked uneasy, fumbling for words, and tried to excuse himself by saying he was not officially on duty. Eileen pressed him further, pointing out that his presence in a place like this was suspicious regardless of his explanation. Diego admitted with a frustrated groan that no matter what he said, it would indeed sound suspicious. He cursed under his breath, saying the situation was driving him mad. She then asked if he had by chance seen her father. It had already been a week since her father last came home, and she was convinced that he must be somewhere in the alleys nearby. That was why she had come to look. Diego tried to change the subject, suggesting that she drink something instead. He asked if she might prefer hot chocolate or perhaps warm milk with honey. Eileen narrowed her eyes, certain that he was trying to hide something from her. She accepted the drink he offered nonetheless, and as she gulped it down, he sheepishly admitted it was beer. Eileen downed it in a single breath, prompting Diego to remark with nervous laughter that she was truly grown up now, even drinking beer so boldly. But Eileen refused to let go of the matter. She firmly stated that he knew where her father was. His attempt to hide it proved her suspicion correct. She asked if there was some reason why she must not find out. Diego faltered, fumbling for excuses when suddenly a presence appeared behind her. A voice leaned close and whispered in her ear, telling her that Diego could not say it, and that if she needed to be angry, she should direct it at him instead. The voice belonged to Cesare. Eileen stiffened as Cesare himself stepped forward. He calmly offered her cookies, assuring her there was no need for worry. Eileen's cheeks burned with embarrassment, wondering why he had to appear precisely at such a moment when she was in such a disheveled state. She thought he must surely see her as pitiful. Her thoughts lingered on the expression she had glimpsed on his face earlier, and she felt his restless gaze upon her. Yet, when their eyes met, he softened his features into a smile. He remained seated beside her, feeding her cookies with his own hand. Eileen blushed furiously, asking about his expression just now, but she quickly dismissed it, convincing herself it was only her imagination. She tried to protest, saying she could eat by herself, but he only smiled more warmly. He reassured her that she had no reason to worry, that he would never harm her. Then, with a teasing glint, he added that the only thing she might fear from him was a kiss. He gently cooped her face, and Eileen, flustered, blurted out a question. Was he truly intending to marry her? Caesarea asked if she still doubted him. He wondered if she still needed proof. Eileen quickly shook her head, insisting that was not what she meant. She explained that before the campaign he had never treated her this way, and those circumstances were indeed different now. The sudden change was difficult to understand. Cesare responded that 7 years was long enough to change any man. But Eileen pointed out that the war itself had lasted only 3. Her words made Cesare pause and fix his eyes on her. She grew nervous and begged him not to look at her in that way. Cesare asked what exactly he was doing that bothered her. Eileen said that was not the point. What truly mattered was whether there was no alternative other than marriage. She pleaded with him that if not then at least he should grant her more time. She admitted that back then she had been too frustrated to explain herself properly. But now she tried to reason, saying her features differed from those painted by existing artists. Her versatility, if applied correctly, would bring significant benefit and prove a great help to his cause. But Cesare leaned closer to her, his voice lowering as he asked her to tell him the truth when they kissed. Had she disliked it? Eileen paused, thinking there was no way she could have disliked it. She looked at Cesare, reflecting that it was something with a man she had secretly loved for years. Yet, she could not bring herself to admit it honestly. Whether it was her dedication to finishing her research or her refusal of his proposal of marriage, all of it stemmed from her feelings for him. Even her confession about not wanting to be a burden came from love. She wondered how she dared to think of herself as loud in front of His Excellency. Eileen then firmly affirmed that she disliked it. Caesar remarked that he had told her not to close her eyes when she lied. Eileen tried to insist that it was not a lie. She claimed it was her first time, and that was why she felt so flustered. Caesar smiled at this, stating that in that case, she must continue until she becomes accustomed to it. Hearing this, Eileen grew embarrassed and tried to hide her lips. She reminded him that he had just fed her cookies and earlier there had also been alcohol. Caesar leaned in too close while Eileen denied him, insisting that this was not the right time. but Caesar kissed her on the neck as he continued, making Eileen whisper that the situation felt strange as she called out to his grace. Caesar pulled her closer, startling her until she screamed for him to stop as the sound of their breaths filled the space. Caesar then addressed Eileen, telling her that on the following day, she was to enter the imperial palace. He kissed her hand, requesting her presence at the victory banquet, asking her to congratulate him there, something she could easily do. Afterwards, he commanded Diego to escort the young lady, and Diego gave his affirmation. Yet, Diego cursed his own fortune, thinking why it had to be him to encounter the young lady during his shift. He thought it could have been Rotan instead. But fate had decided otherwise, and he grumbled as he carried out the task. Later, Diego made his report, stating that the young lady had just been escorted safely. At that moment, someone clutched at his leg, pleading desperately for mercy. It turned out to be Eileen's father. The man begged, claiming Eileen must surely be looking for him. He cried out in pain, questioning why he had been dragged into such a dreadful place. Cesare paid attention to the matter, instructing that Eileen should not be given any more alcohol. He seized Eileen's father and declared that from then on, every last drop of alcohol must be hidden away, to which Diego agreed. Caesar then questioned whether this man still had possessions left to sell. Eileen's father denied it, pleading for mercy, insisting that he was not trying to sell his own daughter. Caesar, however, responded coldly, hinting that what had not even begun could still become reality. Diego observed him and thought that despite the grim scene, His Excellency appeared in an unusually good mood, as if something within him had changed. 6 months earlier, in the Kelpin Kingdom, the enemy king had admitted defeat, declaring that from that moment, the kingdom would be subjugated to the empire. Cesare had laughed it off, reflecting that 7 years earlier, he had finally brought matters full circle for he had followed his heart. The defeated king had begged him to wait, offering anything he wished in exchange for sparing his life. Yet, Cesare had drawn his sword and executed him in an instant. Rotan had expressed surprise, saying that even keeping the king alive for his potential usefulness would not have been too late. He asked if he might know the reason for such a swift execution. To their astonishment, Cesare revealed that he intended to marry. He declared that he would hold a marriage and that he would wed Eileen. Rotan was taken back by this announcement, remarking that Lady Eileen might feel burdened by such a decision. But Cesar stated that the matter could not be helped, for it was better than allowing her to lose her head to the guillotine. Rotan, still in disbelief, asked who would dare threaten the young lady's life. Caesar replied firmly that regardless, he would not allow it to happen a second time. And with that, he smiled with certainty. At the victory banquet, Eileen moved through the crowd, lamenting that she had missed the parade itself. She slipped away to another place, only to be astonished by the sight of the massive formation of soldiers assembled. The people raised their voices in prayer for the glory of the throne empire and for Grand Duke Erzet. From a distance, Eileen pressed her hand to her chest, reflecting that his grace truly radiated light. She hesitated before trying to leave again, but stumbled and fell back slightly. The crowd murmured in confusion, wondering what was happening as his grace dismounted from his horse, leaving Eileen stunned. The soldiers called the crowd to order, commanding them to salute. Then he turned to Eileen, questioning why she looked at him in that way before smiling warmly at her. He told her that all of this belonged to her as well and offered her a flower. The whispers among the people grew, some noticing that knights stood scattered throughout the crowd. Many dismissed it, reasoning that they were simply present in case of an accident, calling it thoughtful. Yet curiosity spread quickly as they began asking who the mysterious woman could be, bold enough to get a lily from his grace. From a distance, the Empress observed the entire scene unfold with sharp eyes. Later, a servant tended to Eileen, informing her that his grace had sent dresses and jewels. With the victory banquet soon approaching, she urged her to prepare quickly, asking where they should begin. She wondered aloud if they should start with her hair. Eileen, bewildered, questioned why he would make such a gesture, knowing full well that the capital would be thrown into uproar. Her thoughts drifted back to the past. She remembered her mother's words spoken with pride that the prince would one day become the very light of the empire. Her mother had said she felt honored to serve as his nanny. She had also reminded Eileen that she too must be useful to him and should therefore keep her shameless eyes hidden. Eileen had understood, though those words had weighed heavily on her. Breaking from her reverie, Eileen told the servant that she needed no adornment. The servant was shocked, but Eileen insisted that they only help her into the dress. At the banquet, nobles whispered among themselves, spreading rumors about what had occurred earlier in the parade. Some claimed that His Grace had handed a flower to a lady, though others insisted it had been exaggerated. A few declared that no beauty in the world compared to her. Others remarked that they had heard she came from a distinguished family. The speculation continued, with some suggesting that if the position of Grand Duchess had already been decided, the identity of this woman must be important. One lady, however, bitterly remarked that the woman must simply be seeking attention out of jealousy. Eileen entered the banquet hall with unease, convinced she should not have come, yet His Grace had asked her to be there. She resolved to greet him quickly before returning. As she moved through the hall, she accidentally collided with a young woman and immediately apologized. The lady turned, asking if she was not Lady Elrod. Eileen froze, recognizing her. Her memory drifted again to the past when a merchant had once approached her to share the latest gossip. He had asked if she had heard of His Majesty's engagement. Eileen had affirmed, though she had struggled to recall the family involved. She had thought it was House Perpellini. The merchant, however, had corrected her, stating it was indeed a lofty house, as expected. He had remarked that such news traveled swiftly because of its popularity. He then revealed that she must also know of the other rumor, explaining that the young lady's original intended match had not been the emperor, but rather the empire's most powerful Grand Duke, A.Z. himself. The name he had spoken still echoed clearly in Eileen's mind, Lady Onella von Perelini, the emperor's fiancée. Copyright. Eileen was taken back, realizing this person was Lady Ola. She quickly tried to offer her greeting, but before she could, several noble ladies hurried toward Lady Ola. They began showering her with praise, marveling at how beautiful she looked and remarking that her dress was truly stunning. Their admiration grew louder as they insisted that the empire itself seemed to suit her perfectly. Eileen, in the midst of it, recalled Cesare's past words, reflecting that the title seemed to suit Lady Ola better than her. Among the group, one lady cast a curious glance toward Eileen, confessing that she had never seen this young woman before. Lady Onella, without hesitation, declared that this was the very young lady who had received a flower from His Grace during the prayer earlier that day. Eileen felt her spine tighten, a chill running through her as whispers broke out. The ladies muttered that perhaps the rumors about her being an unmatched beauty were false. Some speculated that the story of the Grand Duchess being chosen must surely be nothing more than nonsense. Lady Ola suddenly interrupted their gossip, her tone sharp as she scolded them for their rudeness. She reminded them that His Grace was not the type of man to overlook those suffering under unfortunate circumstance. Lady Eileen, she explained, was merely one of those individuals being sponsored by him. Spreading idle rumors, Lady Onella added, would only trouble His merciful grace, and it was only proper that they apologized. Eileen stood silently, bewildered by how the situation unfolded. As the noble ladies reluctantly turned and offered their apologies, she found the entire scene odd and unsettling. At that moment, Rotan appeared, announcing that he had been searching for her for quite some time as everyone had been waiting. Eileen quickly nodded and apologized to Lady Ola, telling her it had been an honor to meet and that she looked forward to their next encounter. Before following Rotan out, behind her, the ladies whispered with evident dissatisfaction. They grumbled that it seemed unusual for the Duke's knight to personally escort that woman. If she were merely a sponsored individual, an attendant could have been sent. The fact that he came himself made it difficult to believe it was just sponsorship. Oten, however, seemed unconcerned. He thanked Eileen for attending, assuring her that His Grace would be greatly pleased. He asked if her journey had been comfortable and apologized that he had not come personally to escort her, explaining that unexpected duties had arisen. Eileen tried to dismiss his concern, replying that everything had been arranged by His Grace and that she had traveled comfortably. She added with a slight hesitation that he had even sent someone to help her dress, but she had declined, feeling it was unnecessary. Reflecting back, she wondered aloud if she should have accepted the help, since appearing alone seemed to make her stand out even more. Rotan tried to reassure her, but before He could, Diego burst in loudly disagreeing. He exclaimed that if Eileen had dressed up properly, she would have caused an even greater stir, for every man in the capital would have rushed to her side. Eileen, flustered, quickly changed the subject, asking if Sir Mitchell and Sir Senan were present since she had hoped to see them that day. Diego explained that both Mitchell and Senan would likely be late and might not be able to attend. Eileen admitted her disappointment, saying she had wanted to see them. Diego then suggested that they all meet for tea soon. He excitedly mentioned that he had bought a rabbit doll, which he claimed was perfect, resembling her so much it was almost uncanny. Before Eileen could respond, a voice called from behind, addressing her with astonishment. The person expressed surprise at how much she had grown, asking how many years had passed and if she remembered them, reminding her that when she was about 12, they had often played together. Soon after, Rotan glanced at her dance card and remarked that it was already full. Eileen, however, grew puzzled, wondering why the very first line on it remained blank. Rotan, noticing her curiosity, explained that they had reached the greenhouse. He informed her that many new plants had been imported from the east and suggested that she might find something there to aid her research. Eileen's face brightened with delight at the thought, and Rotan encouraged her to take her time. He assured her that she could look around at her leisure without concern. He added that he needed to return to the banquet hall, but that she should enjoy her visit, as there should be no trouble on her way back. Stepping into the greenhouse, Eileen immediately sensed how much it had changed. She recalled her childhood when, thanks to his grace, she had practically lived there every day. It had always been a place where she could set aside her burdens and worries. And even now, years later, that same atmosphere remained. As she wandered deeper inside, she heard a voice behind her remark that it was still a place that brought her peace of mind. She turned quickly, only to find herself face-to-face with Cesare. He welcomed her warmly, telling her that he had been waiting for her. Eileen was surprised and confused as to why His Excellency was here. She quickly greeted the Grand Duke of Erzet, offering him congratulations on his accession. She glanced at Cesare, who only smiled back at her, thanking her in return. Unsure, Eileen asked if she had perhaps made a mistake, explaining that she was still clumsy when it came to formal protocols. Caesar shook his head, denying it, saying she had done well. He reached for her dance card, remarking that she might owe him a dance as well. Without hesitation, he wrote his name in the very first slot and then asked her to come with him. Eileen paused, realizing he had taken the first line, which left her unsettled. He noticed her hesitation and asked what was wrong. Eileen admitted that she never imagined His Grace would ask her to dance. She explained that she was not skilled at it and had not even received proper lessons. Caesar reminded her if she had forgotten who had first taught her the step. Eileen recalled that moment, remembering how she had to step on her own feet again and again just to convince herself it was not a dream. She had danced with His Majesty himself, who must have been busy that day, yet still took the time to guide her for her sake. But alongside that memory came another, her mother's furious scolding afterwards. Her mother had screamed, insisting she could not believe Eileen had wasted His Grace's precious time on something as trivial as dance lesson. She had told her to remember her place